By the way, amazing job done by our host today. So let us give a round of applause. Thank you very much. You did a fantastic job during these 2 days. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we're moving to the end of our conference, of our forum. But I think now we will have maybe the most important conversation from many points of view. You know that in the program it was marked as a secret guest. It's time to reveal the secrets. So I'm very much honored to invite to this stage His Royal Highness, Prince of Iran, Mr. Reza Pahlavi.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. There is something fitting about delivering these remarks here in Odessa, a city that has looked into the face of foreign aggression and refused to blink. A city that knows what it means to defend not just territory, but liberty. I stand before you with the deepest admiration for the Ukrainian people, and with a kinship that is not just diplomatic. It is forged in a shared understanding of what it costs to resist those who believe that might supersedes the will of a free people. I come to you at a moment of great consequences. Iran has endured a year of fire. More than 40,000 of my compatriots were slaughtered in the dark. Unarmed men and women who took to the streets in January, demanding nothing more than the right to choose their own future. They were met with bullets, with mass arrests, with an internet blackout designed to ensure the world would not see what was being done to them. My country has been struck from every direction, by the regime from within, and by the consequences of the regime's own recklessness from without. And yet, the Islamic Republic still stands. Some in this room may interpret that as a sign of the regime's resilience. I am here to tell you it is not. It is a sign of the world's failure to draw the right conclusions from what it is watching. It is a sign that the free world has not yet understood what it is truly fighting, or what it stands to gain from that fight, when that fight is won. That is what I have come to Odessa to say. Let me begin what you should by now be beyond dispute. The drones darkening the skies of Ukrainian cities are built by the same factories, funded by the same regime that deployed drone surveillance over Tehran's streets to hunt down protesters in the dark. They fed coordinates to snipers and arrest squads operating under an internet blackout they themselves imposed. The same drones have been deployed to armed regime proxies across the Middle East. The Shahed drone does not distinguish between a residential block in Kharkiv, a protest square in Tehran, or commercial offices in Dubai. It serves the same masters and advances the same agenda: the destruction of any sovereign people's right to determine their own future. Tehran and Moscow are merely aligned. Are not merely aligned. They are not merely convenient partners of the moment. They are co-architects of chaos, a doctrine that the rules-based international order is a Western imposition to be dismantled, that borders are suggestions, that sovereignty belongs to the powerful, no matter how wicked, and not to the people, no matter how righteous. That democracies are inherently weak and can be made to yield. This is not a new axis. The Islamic Republic has been waging its version of this war for 47 years against the Iranian people. First against them, then against its neighbors, then against any order that constrained it. Russia has been waging its version for decades against its own democrats, against Georgia, and jointly with the Islamic Republic against Syria and the Ukraine. What has changed is that they are no longer doing so in parallel. They are doing so together, coordinated, emboldened. They have been watching very carefully to see whether the free world will respond with the seriousness this moment demands. Make no mistake, they are watching your response to Ukraine's invasion to calculate their next move in Iran. And they are watching your response to Iran to calculate their next move here. I want to speak directly about something that has troubled me in the years I have spent engaging with governments and security establishments across the democratic world. There is a persistent temptation, understandable, human, but ultimately catastrophic and self-defeating, to seek a deal with despots, to find a way to manage them, to appease them, to sign an agreement, ease a sanction, extend a hand, in the hope that a marginal concession will purchase stability. A rabid dog knows only to bite the friendly hand. I understand the appeal. Democracies are accountable to their people. They want results. They want to come home from the negotiating table with something to show. A piece of paper that can be brandished as peace in our time. They want the conflict to be over, the threat to be contained, the problem to be solved, so they can move on, even if only for the duration of their mandate. But let me draw on 47 years of watching the Islamic Republic negotiate with the West, with its neighbors, with international bodies, and tell you what I have seen. Tehran and Moscow play the same rules. The Gromyko rule you are all too familiar with. Begin by dragging things out until your adversaries wear themselves down. Then put forward hardline demands you know they won't accept. Next, hold them responsible for the deadlock. And finally, use the delay to consolidate and improve your position on the ground. Every agreement has bought time for the regime, not for the people and not for the free world. Every sanctioned relief has funded not schools or hospitals, but the Revolutionary Guard, proxy armies, and the drone factories whose products now circle the city. Every handshake extended to its representatives was a photo op the regime used at home to prove that the world accepted it and used abroad to prove the other rogue actors that patience and persistence in the face of international pressure yields dividends. The Iranian people who have suffered under this calculation for nearly 5 decades have a message for you. They paid the price for every deal the world made with their oppressors. They asked that you not make them pay for the next one. Patient engagement with tyrants does not produce peace. It produces better armed tyrants and more exhausted people. never trust the world of tyrants. History has recorded this lesson repeatedly. It was true of every accommodation made with the Soviet Union that simply delayed rather than resolved the confrontation. It was true of every concession made to the Islamic Republic that simply rebuilt with maximum pressure had dismantled. Only democracies build lasting peace because only democracies are answerable to the people who bear the cost of war. Despots are not answerable to no one. And that is precisely why no agreement with them is ever final. I want to say something now that I believe this forum is uniquely positioned to hear. A free and democratic Iran is not merely an Iranian interest. It is one of the most consequential strategic opportunities available to the free world in this generation. Consider what changes the day the Islamic Republic falls. The principal financier and arms supplier of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of the Houthis, of the militias destabilizing Iraq and Syria is gone. The regime that has supplied Russia with the drones currently threatening this city is gone. The military nuclear program developed for coercion is terminated. The engine of Islamic extremism that has spent nearly 5 decades exporting instability across 3 continents is disassembled. The Strait of Hormuz is not used to hold the world economy hostage, but to facilitate international commerce and cooperation. And in its place, a nation of 90 million people, educated, entrepreneurial, historically moderate, and geopolitically significant, rejoins the community of nations. Iran sits at the intersection of the Caspian, the Persian Gulf, and Central Asia. A democratic Iran anchored in the free world does not merely remove a threat. It creates a peace dividend of historic proportions for Europe, for the Black Sea region, for the Middle East, and the rest of the world. Ukraine and Iran are fighting different battles on different soils, but we are fighting the same war. We are fighting for the principle that sovereignty lies with the people, that borders are not negotiable, that the international order is not merely a suggestion, that the strong do not have the right to devour the weak. A democratic Ukraine that endures is a beacon for every people subject to foreign aggression. A democratic Iran that rises is a beacon for every people living under theocratic oppression. Each of our victories strengthens the other. Each of our defeats emboldens the same forces. This is why I am calling for a transatlantic coalition, not merely to support Ukraine and not merely to pressure the Islamic Republic, but to confront the Moscow-Tehran axis as the unified strategic threat that it is. This means coordinated sanctions enforcement that does not allow one side of the axis to compensate for pressure on the other. It means arms and intelligence cooperation that recognizes that Iranian drone and missile supply chain as a NATO-relevant threat. It means explicit political support for the democratic opposition in Iran, not as a geopolitical gambit, but as a matter of moral and strategic coherence. And it means a clear articulation that when Iran is free, the West is ready to move swiftly with investment, with integration, with a full embrace that the nation rejoining the democratic world deserves. I have been asked whether I am concerned about the Islamic Republic's durability, whether the regime's continued survival should temper expectations. My answer is no. This is what I see. I see a regime that used Hezbollah operatives and Iraqi and Afghan militias to suppress its own people in January, not because it was strong, because its own security forces could no longer be fully trusted to fire on Iranian citizens. A regime that imports mercenaries to kill its own people is not demonstrating strength. It is confessing to its own collapse from within. I see a military and intelligence establishment whose outer defenses were exposed and degraded. I see an economy in which the currency has fallen from 70 rials to the dollar in 1979 to 1.7 million today. I see a generation of young Iranians, the most educated, the most connected, the most freedom-oriented generation in the country's modern history, who have decided with their lives that this regime has no future. The Islamic Republic is not stronger than it was a year ago. It is hollower. The facade is still standing, but the structure behind it is not. What is required now is not patience with the regime. It is urgency in support of the people rising against it. For this, our strategy is clear. Maximum pressure on the Islamic Republic, maximum support for the Iranian people, maximum defections from within the regime, maximum mobilization of Iranians, and the Iran Prosperity Project. We have made measured progress on each and every one of these, but we have more to do. IPP is a transition framework developed with Iranian experts, jurists, and civil society. An Iran Prosperity Project with 3 phases: emergency, establishment, and normalization, designed to ensure that when the regime falls, Iran does not fall into chaos, but rises into order. A transitional justice program to ensure we move forward, not with vengeance, but with accountability. An economic recovery package ready to be implemented. A diplomatic posture ready to normalize relations with the West, with Iran's neighbors, and build trust with the international community from day one. We are not asking the world to build Iran's future for us. We are asking the world to recognize that we are ready and capable of building it ourselves. And that standing with us now is in the strategic interest of every nation in this room. We do not need nation building. We are ready to build back our own nation. Let me close with this. 47 years ago, my family was forced to leave Iran. I was 17 years old. I left to train as a military pilot, but never returned home. That was not my choice, while it has never stopped being my country. For 47 years, I have carried the voices of Iranians who could not speak for themselves in the rooms that mattered. I have never stopped believing that Iran would be free. I have never stopped believing that the Iranian people, who gave the world the first declaration of human rights in Cyrus the Great's cylinder, deserve to live with the dignity they themselves defined for civilization. I am not here today to ask for sympathy. I am not here to describe suffering, though the suffering is real and staggering. I am here to make a strategic argument to this strategic audience at this strategic moment. The Moscow-Tehran axis is the defining adversarial alignment of our era. It must be confronted as such, with the same coherence, the same resolve, and the same transatlantic solidarity that defined the West's finest hour. Ukraine has held the line at enormous cost. Iran is paying an enormous price to break free. The free world has moral, strategic, and historical reason to stand with both. Do not negotiate with the axis of chaos. Confront it. Do not manage the Islamic Republic. End it. Do not wait for a better moment. This is the moment. I'm not waiting. The people of Iran are not waiting. History is the tale of actions, not contemplations. We are doing our part. Join us. Slava Ukraini, Payande Iran.
First of all, I would like to say merci. Thank you so much for your words about Slava Ukraini. Believe me, to hear it from Iranian prince, for us, it means a lot. It means a lot. And yes, let us...
It's millions of Iranians believing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this. You know, unfortunately today, when Ukrainians hear Iran, they think not about wonderful country, no, they don't think about great history. Unfortunately, our analogies are different. It's Iranian Shahed drones, which are killing Ukrainians. And in this city, in Odessa, for the first time, Iranian-made Shahed drones were used in October 2022. And it was just 500 meters from my home. And I woke up with my smaller boy, who just, from the huge explosions and thousands of Odessa people too. From that time, these drones killed a lot of people. So when the operation of United States and Israel started 3 months ago, a lot of Ukrainians supported it because we saw the possibility to destroy this awful regime, which is killing Iranian people and which is killing us. And really, probably the most important ally of Russia. And we hoped that it will be ended soon. I don't know, 3 days or 3 weeks, but soon. But already 3 months passed. And we can't really understand where we are now. Because now this conflict with Iran is an operation and situation, or Hormuz is distracting the world from Ukraine. The oil prices are peaking and Russia benefits from it. We wanted Russia to lose an ally, but now Russia is receiving huge money from this and benefiting from what's going on. So where we are now and what should be done to finish the job and to get rid of this Ayatollah's regime?
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I'm honored to be here and have the opportunity to speak to this distinguished audience. You know, it took a while for people around the world to make the distinction between the people of Iran and the regime ruling them. I'm saying this in an anecdote that I can share with you, that when the American hostages were taken in the embassy in Tehran, the mentality back in America was very hostile to Iranians. In fact, Iranians were so scared to identify themselves as Iranian, they used to say, well, I'm from Persia. The word Iran had a negative connotation. My own wife, when she was in middle school in America, was beaten up by some of her classmates just because she was an Iranian. So it took a long time before the world started to see that what this regime does is not representative of the Iranian people. And throughout the years, Iranians that had sought refuge or had to leave the country and assimilated into various host countries that ended up becoming citizens in, whether in America or Canada or in Europe, have proven to be what the true sentiments of Iranians is. They are compassionate, they are peaceful, they are committed to liberty, and they only had to escape our country because of what the regime did to them. And when you fast forward from 1979 to 2026, this very January that I'm talking about, I think the world saw that Iranians, young Iranians predominantly, are ready to risk everything, including their lives, to fight for their liberty. And that's the distinction between a regime that suffocates them, that has taken them hostage from day one, and is still ruling them, and is a problem not just for us, but for the rest of the world. In that context, I think the destinies of the people of Iran and the people of Ukraine is one and the same. Our destinies are sealed. Your victory is our victory will be yours. Why? Because we are fighting the same common enemy. But that's exactly why the world needs to understand that there has to be a parallel approach that addresses the collective problem, so that Tehran cannot maneuver based on what the world does about the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, or vice versa, that Moscow is looking at what the world is doing vis-a-vis Tehran to decide how they can continue what they're doing here, as I explained earlier in my speech. And that's exactly why the alternative has to be clearly defined, that the regime in Iran has basically tried to buy time and prolong the problem. That has been their tactic from day one. And this is a trapping that we should not fall into. The more time goes by, the more we have the consequences of this non-resolution. So the real question is, do we truly believe that it is possible to attain a legitimate breakthrough by means of diplomacy with this kind of regime and move away and say, now we have established a stable peace that can last? I can tell you one thing. Regardless what is the outcome of these so-called negotiations, it will not be durable. Most importantly, for this key reason, that the remnants of this regime will never be acceptable or legitimate in the eye of the Iranian people. They may last for a few months, but then again, there will be a deadlock. And stability, as I explained in my speech, can only be provided when you have a truly democratic system that is accountable to its own citizenry, as opposed to a regime that kills its own citizens and cuts them off from the rest of the world. This is where we need to understand that the final end game is not by a continuation of this regime, but by its total elimination. There's an opportunity to get it done, and it will be something welcomed in our region. I'm sure many of you will be able to see that, not just from the prism of Israel, which has obvious reasons to fear the continuation of this regime, but many countries that today have been directly targeted by the regime in Iran. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries in the Middle East. This is why this is an opportunity in this generation to get it done. And this is why the more the time is dragged, the more the regime benefits in Tehran, or Moscow benefits, as you suggested.
Yeah, but what should be done? So what you see as a continuation, is it a land operation, boots on the ground? What should be done to finally eliminate this regime?
Well, that's what I've been telling the Americans and others, that the people of Iran are the boots on the ground. You don't need to deploy your troops. But for the boots on the ground, meaning the people, to have a chance to return to the streets, they need minimal protection. What happened at the time of the conflict was that the air cover, by virtue of the fact that the IDF was targeting not just the infrastructure of the regime, but also protecting some of the citizenry by hitting some of the checkpoints that the regime had elements to fire on the people were targeted. That stopped all of a sudden. Then the internet blackout occurred, and the regime proceeded into killing thousands of Iranians, not to mention the fact that we have had a continuation of executions in Iran all this time. While there's been a so-called ceasefire, but the regime has never stopped its war against its own citizenry. From January to this day, we had over 680 executions. In the last 2 weeks, 50 people have been executed in Iran. I think part of the pressure that the Western world can bring is to demand one very important element that is missing in the so-called negotiation. The people of Iran are not represented at these negotiations. 40,000 Iranians have not died for the Strait of Hormuz or for a nuclear deal. This is where we have to align your policy by saying we have to continue pressure, we have to continue choking the regime for means to be able to finance and fund and pay its mercenaries, because it could also be a result of economic collapse by the regime that will put it to its end, not just only military external pressure. But the best way to avoid having to commit boots on the ground by foreign forces is to help the Iranian people play that role, provided that you give them that added support. So we need aerial cover, we need internet connectivity, we need some means of giving the people the means to actually take the next step and internally bring the regime to its knees. Also, what's important is consistency in messaging, not confusion. When you have confusion, it is hard to expect elements who want to defect to our side not to hesitate, because they're not sure how committed you are to put an end to this regime. But if the people knew that this time is for real, if the defectors know that there is going to be an imminent collapse, that facilitates the defection, that emboldens the people, that further weakens the regime that is only fragmented internally, to hope that they can survive that, and that would just facilitate the transition to change. Change has to occur, and by regime change I mean complete change, not partial change. This regime will never be able to adapt itself to an honest partner. You cannot trust them. The only thing that you can trust is a people that once liberated will be truly committed with the same values and the same ideals that the free world aspires. That's what needs to happen. We are trying to do our part. The world has to decide finally that after more than 40 years of appeasement, which has not led to a solution, this is the time to decide it's time we invest on the people of Iran as an alternative, as opposed to the continuation of this weak regime, and hope to have any changes of behavior by them.
So, thank you. So let me clarify. Are you saying that one important thing, very important thing, which is missing is clear announcement of a final goal of the operation, elimination of the regime, final goal of the operation of the United States and Israel, right?
The only way that you can have an end game is to see that the biggest obstacle to stability, to peace and commitment for it is no longer there to continue threatening you. Israel knows that as long as this regime is in place, it is an existential threat to it. Today, countries in the region see that the regime has not hesitated attacking them. The gloves are off. Until now, it's been always trying to play it low, but now the gloves are off. This is an opportunity to kill the beast that has been wounded. And guess what? A wounded beast is going to come back with revenge and retaliation. President Trump said that I don't want to have to come back 2 years from now and do it all over again. When while you have a chance of doing it, why not do it? This is what everybody expects. Most importantly, this is what the people of Iran expect. Let me make sure that you all understand what I'm saying, and hopefully now that the internet is partially reconnected, you will hear directly from the people of Iran what was their reaction to that intervention that happened. People in Iran were celebrating the fact that the IDF and partly the US Air Force intervened in hitting the regime's infrastructure. People have named streets in Iran after President Trump. This is a nation that looked at it from the prism that this is an intervention that is literally humanitarian to protect more lives to be lost. For us, it was a liberation intervention. And the people of Iran are smarter than you think in making the distinction between when the country is attacked as opposed to when the regime is being targeted. In 1980, when I was in Cairo, 3 months after my father passed away, Saddam Hussein attacked Iran. At the time, having been an Air Force pilot, I sent a message to the Iranian authorities that I'm ready to return to Iran and to fight as a fighter pilot against the Iraqi invaders, knowing full well that this is a new regime in place in Iran, a regime that started executing our generals, former generals of the military, and our ministers. Some of them were my commanders when I was training in Tehran on an F-5, because this is an aggression to my country. I had to protect and defend our territory. But when the targeting was the instrument of repression against our people to be weakened, so the people have a fair chance to stand up to it, that was a welcomed intervention. This is why it's important to understand the distinction between when an intervention is necessary as opposed to where everybody condemns war systematically because war is just bad. Well, during the Second World War, I asked some French people, what was your sentiment the day the Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy? Wasn't that part of the French liberation? I think the Iranian people saw that intervention as something that will weaken the regime that is hitting them. The same regime that during the Women Life Freedom Movement was shooting young people in the face. I'm sure you've heard the victims of that moment. How many generations of Iranians protested in at least the last 10 to 15 years? From the Green Movement on, you have seen more and more frequency of people, despite the regime repression, come to the streets and fight. The last time they were on the streets, 40,000 of them were massacred. But millions of Iranians supported that. And today, across the world, we see the diaspora. From New Zealand and Australia to Europe to Canada and the United States, all standing in solidarity with the Iranian people. Yes, we are all victims of the same thing. You see often next to the Iranian flag, the flag of the Ukraine. We remember what happened when PS-752 was shot down by this very same regime. And one day, we hope to have true accountability to what really happened there. We have a commonality of interest in making sure that this regime is no longer there. We have to make sure that it is defeated. It can be defeated. But as much as you trust yourselves in your resilience as Ukrainian, pushing back against the enemy aggressor, you should trust the Iranian resilience that are willing to fight to the very end to free ourselves from the regime. And I think here's an alliance that can start, and hopefully we can have more traction and have more governments of the free world, particularly here in Europe, to join with us and be supportive of that alternative. That's a win-win for all of us. And I think this is exactly what it all boils down to. It should not be about the price of a gallon of gasoline. It should not be about midterms election. It should be about democracy defeating tyranny.
Thank you. But the question is, we saw during last many years, we saw several attempts of big protests in Iran. You already mentioned some of them. And last protests in January were really big. The question is, why after start of operation we don't see these protests? The internet is cut, we understand. Maybe we just don't know. So, or maybe the moment was lost when the operation should start earlier, when people were on the streets and were ready to fight. Or maybe, as some people say, Iranians are rallying around the flag, feeling it as an attack on Iran. So this is a very important question for us to understand.
Well, that's exactly why I told you the distinction. As I said, the people inside the cities that were hit by the intervention of the IDF or the US Air Force were actually celebrating these attacks. The video is out there. There's tremendous amount of footage in social media that some of you may have seen and you haven't. I hope that you take a look at it. This is coming straight from inside Iran. This is not manufactured. This is not an interpretation. This is actual video footage of people in Iran, different cities that were in fact cheering the fact that something is being done to weaken the biggest enemy of the people being the regime itself. Now, what happened is that momentum stopped all of a sudden. It was supposed to be continued. All of a sudden we heard, stop eliminating regime leadership. You know that many people were taken out, including Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. But all of a sudden, it was said that don't take someone like Ghalibaf out. We need him to be part of this diplomatic effort of resolving the problem. That conflict stopped out of nowhere, leading into this phase of so-called ceasefire for potential negotiations. The fact that the momentum stopped doesn't mean that people's resilience has stopped. The problem for us is not our resilience to continue the fight. It's the opportunity to safely come back to the streets. When when January 8th and 9th happened, we had to adjust our tactics. We had to retreat back home. I told my fellow compatriots, the next time there's a call to action it has to be done in an environment that is conducive to be able to at least minimal casualties possible in risking to come back to the streets. We cannot do this when there are mercenaries in Iran that the regime is bringing to shoot people. We cannot do it when there are still checkpoints where snipers are shooting civilians. This is an element of coverage that will enable the people to come back to the streets. So there is an external component to that. You cannot simply say, Iranian people, you're on your own, good luck, try to emerge. Look, maybe we might have to do that, but the cost of human losses is staggering if we have to do this all alone without any kind of external protection. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking for others to fight our fight. We'll still be the first one in the line of fire, but at least we won't be alone. At least it will give the people of Iran a fair chance to overcome. You embolden them as opposed to embolden the regime. Everything is a balance that tilts towards the people as an alternative, as opposed to tyrants that try to maintain themselves in power by using maximum brutality against their own citizenry. And we have seen examples of this many times in history. The tide changes the day the world finally puts complete pressure on the system and forces it ultimately to surrender, and in this case, perhaps collapse. Because this is not the regime of South Africa that begins negotiating with Nelson Mandela and puts an end to apartheid. I hope we could do it that way, but with this regime that kills 40,000 people in less than two days, I don't think you can reason with them. The only way is to take them out. And when the Iranian people who are defenseless, who are without arms, have to face that level of brutality, how do you change the equation? The only way you can change the equation is to give them equal footing. And the only way is to give them a chance to overcome the regime by severely hitting the regime when it hurts their ability to conduct war against their own citizenry. It is truly a war, but it's not so much a foreign war as it is a war of a regime against its own people. That's what needs to be understood. So therefore, people are not rallying the flag because they think this regime is there to protect the nation against a foreign aggressor. This is a regime that is prepared to bring in foreign mercenaries to kill their own citizens. I think it's very obvious to the people of Iran. What I hope is for the outside world to recognize the difference and the fact that Iranians know that this difference exists there, that they welcome this intervention because it paves the way for them to have less of a cost and human life to be lost as a price for success and victory. We are still willing to pay the price. All you can do by intervening is reduce our human losses in our fight for liberty. That's really what is the question, not whether this is a legitimate fight. And as I said, if the Iranian people have been messaging by any means possible to the outside world, why don't you stand with us and help us defeat this domestic enemy? That's the fight we are fighting. And every time they've been thrown under the bus. They had reason to believe that maybe this time there's an opportunity. I still think there's an opportunity. I still think there's a momentum that can be continued. The last thing that would be an obstacle is to believe that this time the regime is going to change its behavior and finally be reasonable enough to come to the table. And let's even assume that's that the posture that the current weakened regime will take. As I said earlier, it won't be lasting. It might survive for a while, but it will never be legitimate. The people of Iran has sacrificed too many lives to settle for the remnant of this regime. This is not Venezuela in a post-Maduro period. The Iranian people want a clean break from this regime. That's what we need to have, a total liberation, if you want to have a legitimate democratic alternative to the current theocracy ruling Iran.
Thank you. There is so many parallels and analogies because what Ukraine was suffering from, this indecisiveness of our allies. When the Russian aggression started and our allies supported us a lot, and we are very thankful to the United States, to European countries, Great Britain, other allies of Ukraine. But the problem was that there was no clear goal that Ukraine should win, because it was like Ukraine should overcome, Ukraine should survive, Ukraine, somebody were telling Ukraine should win, but we're afraid of Russia to lose. And this indecisiveness and ambiguity harmed us, and that's why we are now where we are. So when I hear you, I hear so much in common. But taking from this point and coming closer to our Black Sea region and then to Ukraine. First, I would like to ask you about Georgia. And recently, there was an editorial in Washington Post which said that Georgia, previously known as a reliable Western ally of all places, was slipping into Iranian regime's orbit. A recent report from the Hudson Institute, by the way, one of our partners of this forum, said Iran was able to build a huge network of IRGC front organizations in Georgia. Why do you think Iran would be interested in invest so much in Georgia, in Black Sea area? What is their purpose?
Well, obviously, when you try to export an ideology, which is exactly what this regime from day one had in mind, not for the interest of the people of Iran, but to basically export this ideology beyond our borders, they will stop at nothing. If they could do it in Europe, tomorrow they do it in the Western Hemisphere. This is why the hand of the IRGC has been extended all the way to the Western Hemisphere. As much as we are concerned about the Moscow-Tehran axis, what about the Tehran-Caracas-Havana axis, which is part of how far the regime was willing to stretch? In the last few months, I've been traveling in Europe, visiting various countries and meeting with various parliament leaders and government officials. And if you look at the pattern of behavior, what the regime has done in now threatening the domestic security of these countries, targeting citizens of different countries, whether German or Swedish or others, by extending through their networks, by radicalizing the population there, either out of anti-Semitic sentiments or basically anti-Western positions, the regime will stop at nothing. And that's exactly part of their tactics to the staying power of dissuading the world that they have a chance to see it through and gain some time. And meanwhile, they have been doing all of that. This is a very different story than, let's say, North Korea, which is a pariah state, and every now and then does some saber rattling and fires a few test rockets. But I don't think it's in a country that is trying to export a communist ideology anymore. The regime, the Islamic regime, has reason to do what it does because its existence depends on its ability to have success stories to tell its hardcore supporters, not just in Tehran, but all of these radical forces. So when we came to Europe and told them, listen, understand that this is a problem. I remember a conversation I had years ago with a member of the House of Lords in Britain. We were traveling in Switzerland. This is 1981, a year after the Iran-Iraq war. And I told him, Your Lordship, the way that Europe looks at the Middle East, you think that it's a region far away from your borders, a bunch of Muslims are hitting on each other's head, it's not really going to affect you. But it's going to end up in your own backyard one of these days. Look at Paris today. Look at London today. They're trying to impose Sharia law, not in Damascus or Tehran, but on the streets of Belgium, on the streets of Paris, on the streets of London. How far are you going to allow this radicalism to continue to exist? It's a direct threat to the stability and the demographics of Europe. And the minute you talk about Islamic radicalism, they said, oh, you are Islamophobic. Let's not talk about that. Well, look at the consequence. They've been given the chance to do that. Why? Because for 4 decades, the central foreign policy of key Western governments has been appeasement, with the hope to force the regime to have a change of behavior. That has been the basic strategy of Western governments, US included, mind you. Has it paid off? No. It has only allowed this regime to remain in power, to be able to expand its, deploy its reaches, not just Hezbollah and Hamas in the immediate region, but all the way onto European soil. That's another reason why we're saying that, look, the only way to reverse all this cycle of forced migration for Europe that is already so saturated, one way to alleviate your energy requirements. So you don't have to be blackmailed by Russia every winter for energy uses. For a country like Iran that has one of the largest reserves of gas that can provide for decades Europe with its energy requirements, don't you think that all of this rides upon this regime no longer be there? Can you actually conduct clean business with a corrupt IRGC-controlled country that controls every aspect of the Iranian economy? You want them as an honest partner in this? Of course it's not going to happen. So everything rides onto the fact that a change that will be lasting, a change that will be conducive to economic opportunities once the regime is gone, not to mention all the security concerns. It all depends on this regime to be finally defeated. And most importantly, you're not forcing that on a nation. The people who ask for this the most are the people of Iran themselves, who have been crying out for help for all this time. They've been voiceless. I try to be their voice to talk to all of you here and elsewhere that for one time, after 47 years, try to find a solution beyond the regime. Trying to do more of the same and expecting a different result is pointless. The alternative is not this regime. It's the people who are committed to be your true allies, who share the same values of liberty, of democracy, of non-discrimination of any kind, versus a regime that has been the institutionalization of discrimination, first and foremost against women, and then against minorities, or ethnic groups, or religions, and so on and so forth. Everything is riding about the disappearance of this regime. It's good for us as a nation because we'll be liberated. It will be good regionally because people in the immediate region will be positively affected by it. That goes towards all the Black Sea region, Georgia, others. But the game that the regime is playing is proxy deployment of exporting an ideology. What we're trying to do is to guarantee stability, peace, and opportunities in the future by means of liberating Iran, and that's exactly what's a choice to be made. Either you believe that we can continue with this regime still existing, or this is truly an opportunity to change the world for the better. The people of Iran are ready to act. As I said, we're not waiting for it, we're doing it. We hope that you join us in this fight.
Thank you. We don't have much time left, but this is super important and interesting conversation. So, keeping in mind that we are short in time, I want to ask you several more questions. First, let's speak about elephant in the room. In our case, crazy bear in the room, about Russia. I will not ask you, it's clear, you said clearly, Russia and Iran are closest allies, we all know this, we feel it on ourselves. The question is, Iran definitely was helping Russia in their war against Ukraine. Is Russia now helping Iranian regime to survive during this operation? Is Russia providing military intelligence to Iran? Is Russia providing weaponry, all these surveillance systems? Are there Russian intelligence, agents of Russian intelligence active in Iran right now?
Well, way before the conflict with the Ukraine, the relationship between Moscow and Tehran, particularly with the military apparatus, has been long-standing. It started decades ago. So there's nothing new to that. The question really is controlling Damascus, and of course Bashar Assad is no longer there, so it was a sort of loss for Moscow. So right now they're hedging a lot of their bets on Iran. But I think that the momentum is beginning to shift a little bit in the long term. As I said, I think Moscow is waiting to see what the world is willing to do vis-a-vis the regime in Iran. They know that it will play very much against their interests if Iran is liberated. Likewise, as much as what's happening in the theater of the Ukrainian conflict affects us as well, because those two axes feed on each other's victories, meaning our collective defeats. That's really what's standing. So that's why I think that the policy should be not just to think of Iran alone and separate this from the Ukraine and what you have to face as Ukrainian, but to understand that both of these simultaneously work together. Whatever works for you works for us, and I think it's vice versa. This is the only way to put an end to that axis that is benefiting from this lack of cohesion or coordination, if I could call it that. It is a separate conflict, as I said in my speech, but at the end it's the same war we are fighting. We have the same common enemy, and that's why we need to overcome. And that's exactly what I think, and this is a discussion I had the privilege of meeting twice President Zelensky, and we talked about all this, and how it affects us, and why the world has been slow in responding and reacting, sometimes reacting when it's too late. But it's never too late. This is a moment that we can finally seal the deal. Again, the spirit of this conference is the end game. The end game starts with the end of the Islamic regime in Tehran. That's a huge, huge game changer for the whole world. And you have every opportunity to get it done right now. Because most of the countries directly concerned, even if some of them are not yet publicly stating it, but in the last few weeks, they have many more reasons to be quite more aggressive about stating it, see that as the final solution. I believe the Saudis see that, the Arab Emirates see that, other countries in the region see that. And what's frustrating is that while the momentum was going on, all of a sudden it stopped. And there's a big concern about not being clear on the intentions. We need to reverse that. There has to be a clarity of purpose. There has to be an understanding that this is the ultimate solution. I think it's important for President Trump not to think that he's alone in that. I think Europe has to overcome this anti-Trump mentality and think more in terms of what's really good for them at the end of the day, for your own sake, not for the sake of the Americans or the Israelis, but all of us collectively knowing that we have a common problem. And to transcend party politics and look at this as a multi-partisan approach, as a matter of national interest. Whether you are German political parties or Ukrainian political parties or French political parties or British political parties, it should be beyond this or that party. It should be about the national interest and the collective interest of the EU. And I think that we as Iranians, once freed, will show you that we are reliable partners that are committed to peace and friendly relationship with our neighbors. We have no quarrels with Israel. In fact, we welcome our Israeli friends to help us with many challenges that Iran faces. When I traveled to Israel 2 years ago, it was to also discuss their help in terms of their expertise in water management, because Iran faces a very serious water crisis, I must tell you. And these are the reasons why, unlike this regime that wants to wipe Israel off the map of the world, we see them as genuine strategic partners. We want to work with our Arab neighbors. Iran proved before the revolution the kind of relationship it had with the whole world, particularly with the West. And I think once liberated, Iran will prove yet again that this is the kind of people who will be on the same wavelength with the same principles. And we only hope that once liberated, we can bring every freedom that we enjoyed in the Western world that has been denied to us back home in Iran. That's why we need the solidarity and the support of Western democracies more than anything else at this time.
Thank you. And now coming to what Ukraine, our position here, it's clear. We want this regime to fail. We want to see free Iran because it's a question of secure Ukraine. We feel it very well, unfortunately. I sponsored to Ukrainian parliament the bill about severance of diplomatic relationships with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Do you, as Prince of Iran, do you support such step from Ukraine?
I think every step that demonstrates that based on the comportment of this regime in terms of its behavior against its own citizens to begin with. Of course, there are threats to the rest of the world. Of course, there are belligerence. Of course, there's hostility. But most importantly, the behavior against their own citizens. Can they ever be considered legitimate anymore? They're certainly not in the eye of the Iranian people. So any move that demonstrates that you take this seriously, that you can no longer tolerate nor accept this kind of comportment, that you cannot accept that this regime in obscurity continues its massacre of the Iranian people, executions, political prisoners, what have you. This is the time to certainly demonstrate beyond just condemnation and beyond just rhetoric, but by action, that you are serious this time. This is something that needs to embolden our fellow Iranians back home. All actors in civil society, all our people who are now in prison as political prisoners, the end of apartheid by means of external pressure, by forcing this regime to acquiesce the fact that their days are over. Any deal with this regime, any continuation of diplomatic recognition is only used by the regime to claim legitimacy when they have totally lost it at home. You tried it for 47 years and counting, but you do have a better alternative. And I think it starts by no longer recognizing this regime as being the legitimate representative of the Iranian people. It's by expelling their diplomats. It's by shutting down their embassies or all the networks through which they channel funds to radicalize citizens against your own population in your own respective countries. That's the very least that could be done. And I would definitely welcome that. And I think millions of Iranians will respond very favorably to such an initiative.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You already mentioned awful tragedy which happened in the sky of Tehran. It's about flight PS 752, January 8, 2020. Just a short question. After Iran will be liberated and you will be a leader or in leadership of Iran, in this case, can we count on transparent investigation and payment of compensations to all those who suffered from what had happened when this flight was shut down?
I mean, there has to be justice for the victims. I met with many of the families of the crash, and it was not a crash; it was an actual targeting by
deliberate targeting.
Of course, I mean, unfortunately, that's something that is tagged as on the responsibility, and justice has to be served. Again, part of our transitional justice plan, as I mentioned in IPP, addresses many issues in terms of what's happening. And hopefully, the rule of law and transparency will resolve many of these outstanding issues that cannot be ever resolved as long as this regime is in power. So that's definitely something that will be conducive. Reason more for us to expedite the demise of this regime so that finally we can have true rule of law, true judicial process, and for justice to prevail for any victim of this regime's behavior, Iranians and foreign nationals together.
Thank you very much. And I want to ask you to make a short address to Ukrainian people, to those who are listening to us now, who will listen after. Just give an address to Ukrainians who are listening to you now.
What I can tell our friends here in the Ukraine is that we as Iranians appreciate many of your fellow compatriots living abroad, standing together with us during demonstrations of the diaspora in support of our fellow citizens at home. We have seen so many countless Ukrainian flags flying right next to ours. And that means a lot. When I went recently in Germany, participating in the last security conference, I went to the main square where over 250,000 Iranians had gathered in demonstration that day, and there were so many Ukrainian flags flying there. It was about Iran, but yet the flag of Ukraine was there, which shows one thing. It shows a solidarity, but also a sympathy that you have shown to Iranians, not only arguing for Ukraine, but understanding the commonality of interest. And you've seen many Iranians participating in demonstrations of your fellow Ukrainians in different countries. That's very important, that sort of people-to-people relationship, because that's really what lasts at the end of the day. Regimes change, governments come and go. What's eternal are people. And that bond, I can't put any value to it. So thank you all for standing with us.
Merci, thank you very much. Your Highness, that's your first time in Odessa.
That's correct.
Your first time in Odessa and your first time in independent Ukraine. As I know, you told me that you've been in Kiev many years ago when it was still part of Soviet Union.
1976.
Yes, many years before I was even born. But I would tell you that we all want this to be not the last year visit here. So first of all, as a chairman of Black Sea Security Forum, I want to invite you next year for our next edition. We will have a special panel about Middle East and Iran. I hope that you will come to us from Free Tehran. I hope very much. And I hope you will come to peaceful Odessa when the war will be over. But in any case, we want to continue this conversation. We want to continue this bond. We want to continue to work together. Because, you know, we are Tehran, Odessa, Kiev. You know, we're different from Las Vegas. You know why? Because what's going on in Odessa, in Kiev, and in Tehran never stays just in Odessa, Kiev, or Tehran. The whole world feels what's going on in our city. And we need to do in our cities, in our countries, and we need to do everything we can to make not only our countries but the whole world better.
Well, hopefully we'll have a sister city in Iran for Odessa.
That would be amazing. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, His Royal Highness, Prince of Iran Reza Pahlavi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.